I even updated my Thoroughly Amateur title card for this Thoroughly Amateur production. And see if we can't get the camera where I like it. This is a Thoroughly Amateur production for the Whiskey for Beginners channel. And what we'll be looking at today is the question, what is bonded whiskey? Now, if you're brand new to whiskey, you might not even have heard of this yet. You probably haven't had any. Bonded whiskey is generally more expensive than non-bonded, but you're going to run into it sooner or later. I know I have. I've had one bonded whiskey so far, and that's Mellow Corn whiskey. It's the only bonded corn whiskey in the United States. Bottled in bond or bonded, you'll see it both ways, usually bottled in bond, is a purely American term. You won't find it in Scottish whiskey or Irish whiskey or Canadian whiskey. And it goes back to 1897 with the Bottled in Bond Act. And the background is that whiskey rectifiers, as the term was, were palming off almost anything on people as whiskey. They'd take just the cheapest alcohol they could find, and they'd put tobacco juice in it. They'd put acid in it to give it a burn. It was sometimes awful stuff. Not everybody was doing it, but some were. And so the Bottled in Bond Act was to provide a way for customers to say, this is good whiskey. That may be junk. This is good whiskey. This stuff is not poisonous. It's not fake. It's the real thing. And obviously Congress, never content to leave something alone if it works, has updated the law now and then. But that's the background, and what it does on our end, the whiskey drinkers' end, is really pretty simple. To be a bottled in bond whiskey, it first must follow all the rules for that kind of whiskey. If it's bourbon, it has to follow the rules for bourbon. If it's rye whiskey, it has to follow the rules for rye whiskey. If it's wheat whiskey, it has to follow the rules for wheat whiskey, whatever it might be. Then on top of that, it has to age in a federal government bonded warehouse so that federal agents can examine it, can test it as it ages, and make sure nobody's doing things to it that would make it something other than real, genuine whiskey. It has to age at least 4 years, which means that, assuming it follows all the other rules, it's going to be a straight whiskey. You'll remember in the last video, if you saw it, that straight whiskey must age at least 2 years, and if it ages 4, then it doesn't have to have an age statement on it. Well, this whiskey in this bonded warehouse is going to age at least 4 years. Then it has to be in the bottle at 100 proof. If you think in terms of alcohol by volume, that's 50%. Proof is just alcohol by volume times 2. So if you get a proof, you divide by 2 to get the alcohol by volume. So age in a government warehouse for at least 4 years and bottled at 100 proof, in addition to all the other rules for that particular kind of whiskey. And then on the label it will say bottled in bond or maybe bonded. And that doesn't mean as much as it used to, because nowadays you have straight whiskey. Most American whiskey, it seems to me, is straight, which already means there are no additives except water to proof it down to the proof the distiller wants to sell it at. But at one time, it meant this is good whiskey and you can depend on it to be good whiskey. And bonded whiskey is likely to be a little more expensive simply because of the extra expense of complying with the rules of bottled and bond whiskey. But that's what it is. As I look at my notes, it looks like the next video is going to get into some practical matters. How do you taste whiskey? But for now, that's the end of this video. This being a thoroughly amateur production, I have no fancy endings, and so goodbye.